He's no stranger to any of us, inshallah. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Sheikh Abdullah Hakim quick to address us, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallam ala Sayyid al-Awwaleen wal Akhirin. Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabi. Wa man da'a bi da'watihi wa stanna bi sunnati ila yawmiddin. Wa sallam tasliman kathira. Amma ba'd. All praises are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. I send peace and blessings on the Master of the first of humanity and the last, our beloved Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and to all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. My beloved brothers and sisters, I begin with the greeting words of the righteous. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the gift of Islam. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the extent of the ummah, that Muslims are in so many different places, that there are so many positive things happening in the Muslim world. I just recently returned from Spain last week, from Al-Andalus, traveling with Muslims from around the world. And I want to share with you some of the information that we have been reflecting on in our rihla, in our travels in the path of Allah, seeking knowledge with the intention of making change. And this concept of seeking knowledge of the past in order to affect your life is something which is the essence of the Quranic teachings. The ulama have shown us that over 1/3 of the Quran is qasas. It is history. 1/3 of the Quran. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in showing us the history of the Anbiya, the history of the righteous people, the rise and fall of civilization, Allah has shown us very clearly through human experience gems of wisdom that can benefit us today. Allah tells us in Surah Yusuf verse 111, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ ibratun li ulul albab, that in their stories there is wisdom, there are lessons for those who would reflect. And so Allah subhanahu has made certain principles in the universe. There are qawa'id, there are scientific principles, and we live by these principles. We fly in the air, we go under the ocean. And that is because these principles are fixed principles. What goes up comes down. Water freezes at a certain temperature, it boils at a certain temperature. If these principles changed, we wouldn't be able to build the science that we have today. Similarly, there are principles in the relationship of human beings. And these principles form what we call sunnatullah. It is the way of Allah in creation. And that civilizations have risen and civilizations have fallen. Today, Muslims are at the doorstep of great change. In one direction, there is imminent destruction, a well-orchestrated plan to put out the light of Allah. But in the other direction, there is hope, and there is a path with light in it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enshrined in his final revelation and enshrined through the life of the last Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And so our numbers in the world are large. We are over 26% of the earth's population. We have some of the richest people on the face of the planet Earth. We are about 60% youth. 60% of Muslims around the world are under 25 years old. Great potential, but yet we don't see results from the potential. And so something is needed, a perspective is needed, an understanding of who we are, where we are going, in order that we can put into practice the revelation. And so in the study of history, in the study of what happened to the Muslims, there are great gems of wisdom, not only for the present, but for the future. So I want to take you on a journey tonight, taking you into the Mediterranean Sea, into the oceans, cross far away, cross the Atlantic, to see what happened to Muslims in the early times. And this is crucial for our understanding here, because especially the younger generation, we are being fed, bombarded with stories, not about the great ones in Islam, not about the prophets, not about relevant, important information, but our heroes now are mutant creatures, aliens, X-Men. We have been fed, we have been put into cyberspace, and in some cases left out in space. So we want to look at some very important issues tonight. I'm going to skim through this with you, taking you on a long journey. But this information is one which is being studied by our leaders today in order to understand where we are going. In order to understand what happened in the Mediterranean and in Al-Andalus, we need to look at the time, from the time of Isa alayhi salam. In the time of Jesus, the son of Mary, peace be upon him, his followers were 100% Jewish. They were the Jews of Nazareth, and they were called An-Nasara. In English, we say the Nazarenes. And these Nazarenes, you could say, were the Muslims in the time of Isa alayhi salam. They were the ones of those who were submitting to the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. They believed in the revelation. They centered themselves in Jerusalem itself and in Greater Syria. They followed the law of Moses. They looked at Jesus as a man, as an inspired teacher who became a prophet. They saw him as the Messiah. But at the same time, another group came up. And this was led by a man named Saul. Saul was Jewish himself. He was a friend of the disciples of Jesus. And he claimed that one day on the Damascus road, that's Syria, on the Damascus road, that he saw Christ. And he came with a new interpretation of the religion. He went back to the disciples. And he tried to teach his teachings, but they rejected him because he was introducing new ideas. He was talking about God being inside of Jesus. He was talking about taking the message away from the Beni Israel and teaching the Gentiles. He was giving them things that they had never heard of before. It's what you would call today bid'ah. وَكُلُّ بِدَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ وَكُلُّ ضَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. He was teaching innovations that will take you to the fire. And so the disciples rejected Saul. He changed his name to Paul. And he went into Greece and Rome and spread his message throughout the northern areas. He claimed that he witnessed Christ. He claimed that this message could be taught to anybody. You don't have to follow the law of Moses. He started to do what they call today a reform of the religion, to reform it, to change it, to meet the times. And his followers, for the first time, were called Christians. Christians. Before that, they were not Christians. They were Nasara. They were Nazarenes. They were the Jews of Nazareth. And so the difference between the Christians and the Nasara, the followers of Isa alayhi salam maintained their faith. And they lived in the area of Syria, Philistine, down into Egypt, across North Africa. They maintained the belief in one God. But Paul, his teachings began to spread, and it opened up the door to many different forms of innovation. And so there were people who believed in many gods in Greece. You have a god for the sun, for the moon, for love, for war, the Greeks and Romans have many different gods. And some of them wanted to become Christians. You had other people, the followers of Mithras, who believed in a man who was the Son of God, who came down to earth to die for the sins of people. His holy day was Sunday. Now think about the individual I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about Mithras, who they believed was their great leader and Messiah in the ancient times. And so these people also wanted to become Christians. And so in the first 300 years of the Christian era, AD, the Christian world was divided into different groups. A leader came along whose name was Constantine. Constantine, those of you who are students of history, of comparative religion, understand this individual. Constantine was a sun worshipper. He wasn't even a Christian. He believed in the power of the sun. And he changed their holy day from Yom Sabbath, right? From the Sabbath, he changed it to Sunday. You see it in the word? The day of the sun. He also introduced the cross. The cross is an ancient symbol for eternal life. This is a cross of ancient Egypt called the Ankh. From the time of the ancient Egyptians, they used this symbol. So the cross did not come from Isa alayhi salam. He had nothing to do with this. It was introduced in the time of Constantine. Constantine's people built a huge house of worship called the Hagia Sophia, which is still in Istanbul today. The city was called Constantinople. And the power of Rome, when the Italian Rome was destroyed, it shifted to Constantinople. That is the Eastern Orthodox Church. That is called Byzantium. That is a room that you see in Surah Ar-Rum. The Romans were actually of the Eastern Orthodox Romans of that area. The teachings of one God were maintained by a number of teachers. The major one was a person called Arius. Arius was a Libyan from Libya, and he taught from Alexandria. He taught that Jesus was a man. He was not God. There's no Trinity. Follow the law of Moses. So he was trying to maintain the original religion. And a conference was held. This is another important date. 325 AD. A conference was held in a city called Nicaea. They brought together all of the bishops of Christianity. Those that believe in Trinity. Those that believe Jesus was the Son of God or God. Those who believe in Tawheed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, following Arius. Everybody was there. And Constantine, being a politician, united them together, and they decided in that council to put together the Bible. So the present day Bible, which means bibliothèque in Latin, it's a library. It has Old Testament, Psalms, New Testament. That's what we would call a Torah, a Zabur, right? Injil. They put it all in one book. So it's a library. And they took other writings and they hid it in a vault. They put them away. And they decided that the Trinity would be the belief of Christianity. And they began to spread this with the Romans, the Roman army, all over the Mediterranean. They conquered the Mediterranean using the Roman force. They even threatened the Muslims. They threatened the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And he went out to meet them in a battle called Tabuk. But Allah Azza wa Jal put fear in their hearts and they never showed up. But following that, they continued to intimidate the Muslims, and so the Muslims were sent north and they defeated them. And what is important in these times is that the Prophet ﷺ sent a letter to the king of Rome, to Heraclius. And he told him, peace be upon those, the one who follows guidance Salamun ala man ittaba al-huda amma ba'd. And then he said, accept Islam and you will be saved, and Allah will give you 2 rewards. But if you do not accept Islam, then you will be held accountable for the sins of the Arisiyin. So in the letter of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is a copy of the original letter, he said the Arisiyin. Who were the Arisiyin? So the Prophet ﷺ was talking about, many scholars believe it was the Muwahhidun. These are the followers of Arius. Because after the Council of Nicaea, Arius was killed. And all of his followers were killed. Hundreds and thousands of them were killed. And they were branded as heretics. Like you would call today Murtad, Khawarij, for the Christians. Heretic, they call it. So the Prophet ﷺ was aware of this. And so Islam was not spreading to conquer territory. It was spreading to defend the Muslim Ummah from the Roman army, and also to protect the believers in one God. So the essence of the struggle in the Mediterranean and the world was Tawheed and Shirk. That is the essence of the struggle. Those who believe in one God and those who want to establish partners with the Creator. Wal-iyadhu billah. And so the Muslims then, by the mercy of Allah, opened up Jerusalem, opened the areas up of Syria, all in the north. And they continued on to take back the properties of the Romans. And Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anh led the believers into what is now Egypt. They went into this area and they met a people called Amazigh, that the Christians were called Berber people. And it is reported that a group of these people were brought to the Khalifa Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh. He shed tears. And he said the Prophet ﷺ predicted that people like you would accept Islam. These are the people of North Africa, Amazigh. They are the original inhabitants living in the Sahara, living on the coastal region of North Africa. And a mighty people with a very important history. And so Amr ibn al-As, that's the Masjid of Amr ibn al-As in Egypt. If you get a chance to visit Egypt, then inshallah this is an important place to visit. So the Muslims went right across. See the movement? They went right across North Africa. And they established themselves. The leader of the Muslims was, at that time, was Uqba ibn Nafi' rahimahullah, a great tabi'i, a great leader who led the Muslims right across. And he rode his horse right into the Atlantic and said, if I knew there was land across you, I would take this message across. So they went right across till they reached the Atlantic. But they were being attacked. The Romans were attacking from the north. Some of the Berber people who refused to accept Islam, and led by a woman named Kahina, they would attack from the mountains. So Uqba established a very important city. This is called Qayrawan. This is a part of the history that many of you may not be familiar with. He established the city of Qayrawan in the desert. So the Romans could not attack from the ocean, and the Berber Mushrikeen could not attack from the mountains, because the desert was the natural place for the Muslims who could move through the desert. So Qayrawan was established. What is the importance of this masjid? Uqba ibn Nafi'. This was the masjid of the great ulama, the students of Imam Malik ibn Anas, rahimahullah, of the Maliki school of thought. Here it is that Sahanun put together Al-Mudawwana Al-Kubra, the teachings of Imam Malik, who was the teacher of Imam Shafi, rahimahullah. And this is the basis of the Maliki school. And it is from here that the Maliki school, the teaching spread all the way across North Africa, down into West Africa, into many parts of the Western world. And so, this is the writing, and if you ever see the writing there in North Africa, the Khatt al-Maghribi, you got to adjust your eyes to it, because when you read it, the fa has got a dot underneath it. And the qaf doesn't have 2 dots, it has 1 dot on the top. This is Khatt al-Maghribi. This is another form. It's Warsh. It's another recitation of the Quran. And you might get a Quran from North Africa and you say, there's a mistake here. That's not a mistake. This is a different form of the ancient writing of Arabic. And so the message began to spread all the way across. Berber people coming into Islam. The leaders of Islam at that time was Banu Umayyah of the Umayyad dynasty. And they made an important move. They sent a very important individual. His name was Musa bin Nusayr. That's another name you should not forget. Who was Musa bin Nusayr? His father, Nusayr, was studying to be a bishop in the Christian church when the Muslims reached Syria. And he was captured and he was given as a servant to Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anh, the great leader of Islam. Khalid saw in this man great potential. He freed him from servitude, took him in as his right-hand man, and Nusayr rose in the ranks to be a general. And Musa was his son. So Musa was sensitive to the people of the book. Right in his family, he could remember this. So when he dealt with the Berber people, he gave them opportunities to come in. He did not put Arab versus Berber. He gave opportunities, and so Islam solidified itself all the way across North Africa. Across the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, was the Iberian Peninsula. This is what you know today as Portugal and Spain. It was the land of the Vandals. The Vandals were an ancient Germanic people. Some say they were Vikings, an ancient people who lived in this land. And many of them believed in one God. And they were really strong. They actually destroyed the Roman Empire. That's why today, if I say the Masjid was vandalized last night, this is American English. Does anybody know what I mean by that? The Masjid was vandalized. It means it was destroyed. Right? That's the name of a people, the Vandals. So they called it Andalusia. And then it changed into Andalusia. And it was Arabicized into Al-Andalus. That's where the name comes from. This was an ancient land, beautiful land. When the Jewish people were attacked, when Rome was sacked by the Babylonians, around 350 BC, a group of the children of Israel also went to Spain. So the belief in one God was there amongst the Vandals and amongst the Jewish tribes who had settled in this ancient territory. But around this time, around the 8th century, a crusade began. The church sent out their leaders to enforce the Trinity on people. Remember the struggle between one God and three, right? They sent their leaders out to destroy and to conquer the area. Their leader's name was King Roderick. And Roderick and his forces, they punished the people. And so the people of the north called out to Musa bin Nusayr. We want assistance. And Musa bin Nusayr, he was hesitant at first. We have enough territory. But a Christian leader named Ilian, living in a place called Ceuta, which is the tip of Morocco, his daughter had been violated by Roderick. So he was living under the Muslims as a Christian. And he said to Musa bin Nusayr, I want help. So Musa sent, there were a number of actions that happened. Ilian went himself. A person named Tarifa bin Malik went. And finally, the great Amazigh Berber leader, Tariq ibn Ziyad, rahimahullah. This is a very important person. Tariq then went across. They crossed the straits to liberate the people. And this was in 711. They crossed the straits. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory. The Muslims were about 12,000. Some reports say 7,000 added to it. Reinforcements, about 19,000 facing 100,000. But in those days, that was about even. That was about even. Tariq ibn Ziyad went forward. There is a wrong report about Tariq. Many of you may have read this history that said that Tariq burnt the boats in back of them. right? And said, you got to go forward. This is a mistake. It does not appear in any Islamic text, in any history book for over 200 years. It did not appear. It is later it came on and was pushed by the Orientalists to make Tariq seem like an extremist. But Tariq said, no, follow me. He led by example. And he showed his followers, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. This is the Straits of Gibraltar here. You see it? These are the straits. Right here. Very strategic place in the world. From World War II, it was a key place from ancient times. So Tariq met the forces of Roderick and defeated them. And they named the mountain there, which was called Jabal Tariq, they named it Gibraltar. See how Arabic turns into English? Jabal Tariq, Gibraltar. Right? Muslims eventually planted citrus fruits there. The Arabic word for orange is what? Portugal. Portugal. The land of the oranges. See how Arabic changes into English? There's thousands of words that we're using and we don't realize that the root is an Arabic language. So we're not new people in this part of the world. We have an ancient history. So Tariq then started to go into Spain. Musa came, followed him. And within 3 years' time, they conquered the whole of Spain up to France, except for a craggy mountain place called Leon. The people were opening up their doors to them, letting them in. Why? Why would they open up their doors? Because Tariq did not force them to become Muslim. Tariq did not put taxes on them. He gave equal opportunities to Muslim, Christian, Jew. He lived in a way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as you go up the Cordoba, Wadi al-Kabir river, and this is what it looks like, you go up to the town that was established there, the town of Cordoba. And for 40 years, the Muslims were ruled from Qayrawan or Damascus, where the Umayyads are. But that wouldn't help. They needed local leadership. This was the western wing of Islam. What would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? In this case, He raised up an individual. Out of a terrible situation in the Muslim world came goodness. He raised up an individual whose name was Abdurrahman ibn Muawiyah, rahimahullah. And Abdurrahman, he traveled from across. There was a struggle between Abbasid and Umayyad. He was the last of the Umayyads in this power struggle. He escaped from Iraq. He went into Egypt, hiding underground. He went to North Africa. And you know what's interesting about Abdurrahman al-Dakhil? His mother was a Berber. He was from the Umayyads, but his mother was Amazigh, North African. So the people there responded to him. And then he went up into the area of Cordoba, and he established an amazing civilization. He led by example. This is an important thing. This is what our leaders need to learn today. He led by example. He came down and he would lead salat. He would take care of the poor people at night. He gave equal opportunity in education, Christian, Muslim, Jewish. He studied the land and he brought in scientists. And they planted citrus fruits, and they plant rice in some areas, and they planted date palms, and they planted olives. So some of the best olives in the world are coming from there up until today. This was Abdurrahman, called the Saqa Quraysh. He was the falcon of Quraysh. He is a man that all of our leaders need to study. Progress. You know what he did? One of the first things he did, he brought in water in aqueducts. So every house could have water. What is water? Tahara. It's purity. And he educated people, gave them opportunities. And so Islam became the fastest growing religion. and he changed the cathedral into the Jami Mosque. And what did he do? Did he fight the Christians and take it? No. He bought the cathedral from the Christian people for 100,000 dinars, which in those days was a fortune. And the Muslim population rose. And quiet as it's kept, the majority of Muslims were not from the Arab world or North Africa or West Africa. The majority of the Muslims in Al-Andalus were Europeans. They were the people of Al-Andalus who saw Islam in a positive light as upward mobility, as a tolerant way of life, as a strong, industrious way to live. That's what Muslims are. We are making our prayers, we're clean, we're working, we're studying, we're calling to the good, we're forbidding evil. When we are in this positive mode, people will follow. You don't even have to give them dawah. They want to know, who are you? What is motivating you to live like this? And so this is what they established, a powerful civilization, until Cordoba in the year 1000. You know, we talked about the year 2000, and this is when they call millennium. Okay? But in the year 1000, and it was in one of the big magazines, in the year 1000, Cordoba was the largest city on earth. That's the level it reached. 200,000 houses, 700 masjids, public baths. The streets were lit for 10 miles in any direction. It took Paris and London 700 years to reach that level. Could you imagine this? 700 years it took them to reach the level that the Muslims had reached when they were now submitting to Allah and when they had the broad perspective and implementing the Sunnah. That's what Al-Andalus was. It was a place where everybody could live. They're calling it today convivencia. Right? It is a broad, tolerant society where we respect people of other faiths and we call to the good and forbid evil. And so, Abdurrahman ad-Dakhil, see the movement that he makes? This is a beautiful story. That's the story that our youth should study. Abdurrahman ad-Dakhil. Not the X-Men and Superman versus what he's fighting Batman now and you know whatever. That's not the story. These are our heroes, right? After the Anbiya and the Sahaba, right? These are our great heroes that we should understand. It's a beautiful story of Abdurrahman ibn Muawiyah. His life and what he was able to establish, an amazing person. And every leader needs to study his life in details. So now this society had developed. But Ibn Khaldun, one of the great historians of Islam, he has a concept. He wrote an introduction to a history of the world called Al-Muqaddimah. And in this he studied not just history, what is the relationship of people one to another. And he found out that in many societies, the first people who established a society, they are hard-working, they live by their principles, they establish, but their children are a little bit weaker. And their children's children, in some cases, are born in the palace. And they forgot about the struggle. And unless there is an Islamic revival, unless there is a constant revival going on, then the next generations can get weak and lose what happened in the first. This is why Ibn Khaldun is called the father of sociology. Sociology comes from him. So after Abdurrahman passed away, rahimahullah, and a number of rulers came, one of his great-great-grandsons, Abdurrahman al-Nasir li-Dinillah, Abdurrahman III, he took over. Abdurrahman al-Nasir was a great leader. He protected the borders of Islam. He lifted unjust taxes. But something was happening with him. He wanted to establish himself. The Abbasids had become weak. And another group started to appear in Egypt called the Fatimids. Everybody claiming power. And so he said, we need to establish the Khalifa here. And so he called himself Amir al-Mu'mineen. He called himself a Khalifa. What would he do in order to make his name? He built a beautiful city called Medina Zahra. It is one of the wonders of the world. It's an amazing city. And up until now, this is a shot I took from Spain. It's an archaeological ruins now. This is a wonder city that he built. So although he was doing good, materialism started to come. He was interested in his palace. And you know what the Prophet ﷺ said? He said, Inna li kulli umma fitna wa fitna to ummati al-mal. Every nation has a trial and test, and the trial and test of my nation is wealth, money. You have too much money, you don't have enough money. And so when wealth starts to get to you, you start to forget about where you come from. And so when the poet went to Medina to Zahra, and he looked at it, he said, "O Medina to Zahra, you have built, every house in Andalusia built you, and you will one day rebuild every house." After Abdurrahman's time, another leader took over, called Muhammad ibn Amir al-Mansur. He was not from the Umayyads. He was a strong leader, but he was into this power thing. And that's plaguing the Muslim world today. It even plagues our community today. Because we have a struggle going between masjids and Islamic centers. This is a lesson for us, right? Got to take these lessons serious. Al-Mansur, he built a city for himself called Medina Zahira. He wanted to build a bigger one than the other one. And the poor people rose up and they destroyed both of the cities and rebuilt their houses with what had been taken from them. And so all that is left are the ruins. And so with this is your test. Too much accumulated wealth. Arguing between each other. Fighting between each other. Like we fight. How do you make salat? Do you wiggle your finger in tashahud? Or do you keep it still? It's all sunnah, right? Do you say Ameen out loud? Are you silent? I went to one masjid, I won't say which country. The imam read salat beautiful. And I said Ameen. And I was the only one in the mosque. So they said, where is that shaitan? Right? And they came after me and I said, get Bukhari hadith. And they brought the hadith and I showed them that the Sahaba said Ameen out loud, so loud it shook the building. And they said, we didn't know this. We didn't know this. So sometimes there's more than one way in the sunnah to do something. And we need to learn to respect each other and to respect the flexibility given to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What happens when we fight amongst ourselves? When we're into materialism, the unity is broken. And the forces of evil come down upon us. As we see it happening today. This is an example, clear example in front of us. The Trinitarian forces attack from the north. And one of the worst things that could happen is they would go to one Muslim and say, I'll fight the other Muslim with you. He doesn't like you, right? So the Muslims say, yeah, let's fight him. And they defeat him and then the Christian kills him too. The worst possible thing, to turn against another believer. And so, by the year 1072, Alfonso VI, he crowned himself the Emperor of Spain. This is the first time anybody had ever used this. He had only conquered a section of Spain. That's the areas he had conquered. Remember, the Muslims controlled all of this, right? All of that area. He only had a little bit, but he said, I'm the emperor. But the weakness of the Muslims, not of the Trinitarians who want to destroy the unity between believers in one God, but our own weakness, they capitalized. Alfonso started to attack. He invaded the Muslim lands. until he reached the city of Seville. And he reached out into Seville. And the leader, Al-Mu'tamid Billah, Alfonso wrote him a letter, and he said in the letter, he surrounded Seville, right? It's called a siege. And he said, the most dangerous thing you have is your flies. He's insulting him, right? So he said, can you send me a fan so I can fan your flies? So Al-Mu'tamid turned the letter over and he wrote to him, if you do not retreat immediately, la urawihannaka bimirwaha min al-murabitin. He said, I will fan you with a fan of the Murabitun. He mentioned the name Murabitun. Alfonso retreated immediately. Why would he retreat when he heard one name? Right? Why? When Alfonso retreated, the Muslims gathered together. They had a big meeting now. Organization of Islamic Conference. Rabatat al-Alam al-Islami. Muslim World League, right? They all came together. 22 amirs. The Muslim Ummah had broken up into 22 sections. Each Amir thinks he's Amir al-Mu'mineen. So you have a Khalifa on every corner. Sound like today, right? Everyone's Amir al-Mu'mineen. 22 Amirs. They met with the ulama. And they discussed the issue. And finally they decided, Al-Mu'tamid pushed it, we must bring in the Murabitun. Who are the Murabitun? The Murabitun are the people in North Africa, Amazigh, called the Sanhaja. And the two groups, Judala and the Lamtuna, they take you across the desert, Sahara Desert. And one of their great leaders, and this is going back a little bit, his name was Yahya ibn Ibrahim al-Judali. He made Hajj, his people were fighting each other. They were drinking alcohol, they were committing adultery. He needed to revive Islam, so he made Hajj. On his way back, he stopped in Qayrawan, right? That's the center of the ulama. He stopped in Qayrawan, and Abu Imran al-Fasi told him, I will send you a person who will revive Islam. And that person was in the form of Abdullah ibn Yasin, rahimahullah. That's another name. You should not forget this name. Abdullah ibn Yasin was a great teacher of the Sousse region of Morocco. And he was a revivalist of Islam. Revival is so important to us in our history. And he went back with Yahya to the land of the Sanhaja, that is now present-day Mauritania, this region right here. He went back to this region in the Sahara, but the people rejected him. And he went south. He went south into Senegal. And he set up, he had 5 followers. And he set up a structure or a group they call ribat. A ribat, like the tents. And he would teach the people Quran, Sunnah, calling to the good, forbidding evil. They learned skills. This was the group of the Murabitun. This is how it started. Abdullah ibn Yasin, rahimahullah, struggled in the Sahara Desert until finally, after his struggle, he died shaheed. He died as a martyr, calling to the good and forbidding evil, rahimahullah. The group was taken over by Abu Bakr ibn Umar. This is a part of the history you probably never heard of before. Abu Bakr ibn Umar took over the Murabitun. He made the capital a city called Marrakesh in Morocco. This is Marrakesh there. That was the capital of the Murabitun. And Abu Bakr, he heard that there were people in the south, in Senegal, who needed dawah. So he went south and he crossed all the way across West Africa till he reached Central Africa. Hundreds and thousands of people embraced Islam on his hands. When he came back, or before he left, he gave the leadership to Yusuf ibn Tashfin. This is another important name. He became the leader of the Murabitun. Now, when Yusuf organized the Murabitun, they were 100,000 horsemen. These are the Murabitun. Now you know why. When Alfonso got the letter, and it said, I'll fan you with a fan of the Murabitun. That's what he saw. He knew who the Murabitun were. Back to the council now. Remember the Council of Emirs? They said, should we bring these people from North Africa? They are Bedouins. They live in the desert. They eat, every day they eat oatmeal, milk, and dates. Every day. In Spain, they have 3-course meals. They have porcelain. They have all nice things. Should we bring these Bedouins in? But Mu'tamid said, I would rather be a camel driver than a swine herd. Anybody knows what that means? I'd rather be a camel driver under the Murabitun than a swine herd taking care of pigs under Alfonso. So the Murabitun came in. They defeated the forces of the Trinitarians. They defeated them in 1086. They went back to North Africa. The Andalusians got weak again, and in 1088 they called them back again. They defeated the Trinitarians. They went back. Andalusians got weak again. 1090 they came back again. This time Yusuf said to his soldiers, if the Andalusians will not protect the borders of Islam, take everything. So they took all of it, and they revived Islam. You see the rise and fall of history? That's how our history goes, like a cycle, right? So now the Murabitun come in. This is a long history, by the way. I'm making it short for you. The Murabitun come in. They revive Islam. But the same theory kicks in. Even they had conquered a huge area. They were in control of North Africa, West Africa, Al-Andalus, all underneath their leaders. And they said, we're going to accept the Abbasids as the Khalifa. You know what they used to say in the Jummah? They would call themselves, they would call their leader Amir al-Muslimin. And they accepted the Abbasid as Amir al-Mu'mineen. They said, we want unity. See the thinking? When Abu Bakr Umar came back, remember Abu Bakr Umar, he was doing dawah, right? When he came back and saw Yusuf ibn Tashfin with 100,000 horsemen, what did he do? Some people would say, well, okay, I'm going to make my own masjid. No, you know what he did? He said, you're more suitable to be leader than me. I give it to you. And he went back and gave dawah for the rest of his life. Okay? And so, the cycle of Ibn Khaldun, the first generation, if you don't revive Islam, it gets weak. And you can start to go down. You can trace Muslim leadership and see this. And so it happened to them. Accumulated wealth. Suddenly they weren't eating oatmeal anymore. Now they had 3-course meals. Now they lived in the palace. Right? Now they had dancing girls and wine. Right? They started to get corrupt. Fighting each other. Unity broken. See, this is sunnatullah, right? This is what happens. Your unity will break. Allah raised up another group in North Africa. Al-Muwahidun, under Muhammad ibn Tumat. They, after 100 years of Murabitun rule, they came up and they took over Al-Andalus, and they controlled, but the same, after 100 years, the same cycle hit them again. Accumulated wealth, fighting with each other, unity broken. Keep those principles in your mind. Okay? And so the Muslims now had to hide. They had to run south. This is the Muwahidun. Great places that they made. Look at the territories that they controlled. When they had 22 emirs, the green was the Muslim land. Under Murabitun, see the green getting smaller? Under Muwahidun, it gets smaller. And finally, in the last 250 years, the Muslims lived in the province of Granada, which is surrounded by mountains. And so that was the last stronghold for 250 years. Muslims lived in Granada. about 15% of the place. The leader, who called the Banu Ahmar, they claim to be descendants of the Sa'd ibn Ubadah, who's Ansari. They claim to be from the Ansar of Medina. And they were the leaders called the Nasirid dynasty. And, to make a long story short, because of our time, they ruled, but they ruled in weakness. They paid a tribute to the Christians. They paid them off. And they also gave them troops when they wanted troops. But they wouldn't let the Christian come in and take this land. So at least it was a stronghold for the Muslims, but it was weakness. And it is that squabbling. You see your principles now? Abundance of wealth, squabbling over power, tribalism, abandonment of the Sunnah. Right? It leads to corruption and then destruction. The Trinitarians united. Ferdinand and Isabella as their leaders. Look what they did. I found this in the Mezquita, in the cathedral in Cordoba. Look what somebody did. They made a statue of Mary, and they put a dagger in her heart. What kind of thing is this? What kind of thinking is this? There's nothing to do with Jesus, the son of Mary. They put a dagger in her heart, and they put it inside the church. But they united themselves, and when they conquered the Muslim lands, the Muslims were made into slaves. Now, realize what's happening now. We got Donald Trump right south of us, right? Better realize what's happening. First, they conquer you and make you a slave. And they make you wear special clothes and badges. They call the Muslims Moors, right? You probably heard the Moors of Spain before. Moros means a person of color, colored people. Has nothing to do with your nationality. The Muslims became what is known as Mudajjir. These are imposters. They were servants, but they were still Muslims. Finally, they had an inquisition where they would torture you and they make you accept the Trinity. If you were Muslim, Jewish, or Christian believer in one God, if you don't accept three gods, they burn you alive. That's called the Inquisition. So the Muslims who are hiding their identities, they were called Morescos. And the Jews are called Morenos. Try to understand this, right? May Allah forbid it would ever happen to us. Genocide. In some reports, 3 million Muslims were killed or exiled. 3 million. You see, never again? 3 million. That's the Inquisition. Terrible punishments. Tortures. Terrible things were inflicted upon the people. Even 2 million Jews were also exterminated. But, in this difficulty, there's a beautiful fatwa that we study. This is Bujuma. He wrote the fatwa in 1504. And, the Arabic is so beautiful because he says, when he's talking to the people and he said, "Oh, my brothers who are holding on to hot coals." Right? He's talking about the hadith. You're holding on to your religion like hot coals. Right? He said, "I know you are Morescos. Outside you're Catholic, but inside you're Muslim." They can't show their religion, right? They show their religion, they'll be burnt to death. It got so bad, if you took a bath on Thursday night, they would burn you at the stake. You know what that means? What does a bath on Thursday night mean? This Jummah, right? Maybe you're taking ghusl of Jummah. It starts after Maghrib, right? Even though you're a Catholic, eating pork and drinking wine, they'll burn you alive if you have any smell of Islam inside of you. So the Mufti said, in summary, "I know that you're in difficulty, but hold on to your faith." He said, as you walk down the street, you want to make salat, make the intention for salat, your wudu, you tap the wall. You know tayammum? So walk down the street and tap the wall. That's your tayammum. Pray with your eyes. Think about this now. We are blessed to be able to make salat here, man. pray with your eyes. If you want to make a ghusl, a complete bath, make the niyyah and jump in the lake and go swimming. That's your ghusl. You want to give zakat, then make the intention for zakat and give somebody a gift. Merry Christmas. Give them a gift, right? That's your zakat. If somebody dies, they first buried in the church, their prayer, the mufti said, in the darkness of night, make janazah. You're married in the church in the darkness of night, make a nikah. And so with this, they were able to maintain, underground to maintain their faith. But finally in 1492, the last leader of the Nasrids, Abu Abdullah called Bu'abdil, he surrendered. He surrendered Granada. That is the importance of 1492. Not Columbus, right? You know they say Columbus discovered America? He was lost, right? He bumped into America. He thought he was in India, right? Still call people Indians. Not Indians. 1492 was when Muslims surrendered the authority in Western Europe. Bu'abdil, he surrendered to Ferdinand and Isabella. And the power went. But they intensified on the Muslims. Even though the Muslims were living as slaves, Morescos, they still intensified. No Muslim Moresco midwife. Nothing of Islam. Until finally, under this torture, the Muslims rebelled. Abu Humayyah and the great rebellion of the south, they took a stance for Islam. But the Spanish sent in General Mundajar in scorched earth. They destroyed everything they could find. Until the last of the people, the Mujahideen standing up, either they would get Shahada or they would cross over to Morocco. These are the people who came on the boats with the Spanish, right? The Portuguese and the Spanish. These are the ones with Columbus, conquistadors. These are the ones who destroyed the Aztecs in Mexico with Cortez, who destroyed the Inca, Pizarro, destroyed the Inca in Peru. When they reached, they even reached Sri Lanka too, you know. You know Da Gama, right? Da Gama, they came to Sri Lanka. And when they came around to the Philippines, they looked at the Malay Muslims and they said, Moros, you people like the Moors of Spain, right? Up until today, the Filipinos say Moros Liberation Front. So it was an international conquest. And that's what we are living in today. And you have to keep this in mind when you understand the history of these lands. You have to understand what happened to the indigenous people. And the indigenous people are now suffering up until today. And it's part of our job as Muslims to have solidarity with the indigenous people. You have to understand what happened to African people who were brought here as slaves and political prisoners and not allowed to have jobs, not allowed to have life, tortured and killed by the millions. You have to understand this to be a true part of Canada and a true part of America. That is the true story of these countries. This is what it is. But we can never forget that Al-Andalus, it is a shining example of what happens when you practice Islam, right? The lights go on, right? When you don't practice Islam, down. Remember, accumulated wealth, fighting each other, right? Tribalism. My tribe is better than yours, my school of thought, right? Disunity. And then the unity is broken. And so, in conclusion, Al-Andalus is a prime example for us. And we need to take these examples that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put into our history. These are the qasas. These are the stories of those who came before us. And we only pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help the Muslims to unite today, that we would not be destroyed by accumulated wealth, that we would learn to appreciate and love each other, even though we have some differences, that we would learn even to agree to disagree on certain points, but still maintain our unity. And we would be part of society. We'd reach out to other nations. We'd reach out to other people. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bless us in this life and in the next. So I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullahu khairan to Sheikh for sharing those thoughts and that inspirational lessons from Muslim history of Andalusia. To finish off, I want to call Brother Rimzi, who is the president here at Masjid Jannah, to deliver the vote of thanks. That will be followed by the adhan for Isha Salah. Soon after, we will have the Iqamah and the Salah. And thereafter, after Isha Salah, food will be served while they're requested to stay and eat dinner and leave after that. Jazakumullah.
Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear respected brothers, sisters, and children, Jazakallah khair for coming. And at the same token, we thank you, sir, for coming here and giving us this valuable information. It's really great. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it, all the kids, all the youth, and we encourage you to participate in things like this more and take something back. That's the most important thing. We can have so many lectures, we can have so many events. Most important thing is we have to take it back, and as Sheikh said at the end, there's so many points which is in here which we can take it back and implement it in our life in today's context. In today's context, as you said, there's so many divisions. For the smallest things, we divide on masjids and clans and that and this and everything, but it's the time to unite right now. So we are working on that, and alhamdulillah, I'm sure all the masjids are working that as well, and hopefully we will be having a good united GTA, inshallah, in the time to go. And at the same token, we will be continuing this. If you see our flyer, you would have seen it. This says, this goes as this time. A couple of people even send me text also. It says Jannah Night Series, right? It's like a cricket series, right? It's not a cricket series. So what we're going to do is, inshallah, throughout the year, we are going to expand on these things. So maybe we'll get Sheikh, and we get in couple of more times, and we get other speakers as well, and then go on and even go in depth. So maybe there are so many leaders which he told about, we just brushed it and went off, right? Because of the time constraint. So maybe on another series, on another day, we can go in depth and take one of the leaders and see how it can be contextualized in today's context. Right. So this is going to happen, inshallah, in the future months to come until next year. And I also thank Mufti Saab for organizing this, and he will be organizing in the future as well. So Jazakallah khair.
जश्न आमदे रसूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह बीबी आमिना के फूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह जश्न आमदे रसूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह बीबी आमिना के फूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह ओ जश्न आमदे रसूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह बीबी आमिना के फूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह जश्न आमदे रसूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह बीबी आमिना के फूल अल्लाह ही अल्लाह।